Have you ever wondered why a man can't stop thinking about the woman who never begged, never pleaded, only withdrew in silence? Not with bitterness, not with anger, but with something far more dangerous, self-possession. It wasn't the curve of her body or the sound of her laugh that haunted him later. It was her stillness, the way her absence echoed louder than any words he thought she might say. She didn't explain herself. She didn't perform. She simply became an unanswered riddle, and that is what undid him. Because deep inside every man, buried beneath bravado and certainty, lives a wound, one he doesn't dare look at. Carl Jung called it the shadow, the unconscious part of the psyche that holds repressed fears, memories, guilt, and unclaimed truths. And sometimes, that shadow isn't triggered by conflict, but by a woman's mystery. When a woman says nothing, when she doesn't seek to prove, persuade, or please, she becomes a mirror. And the masculine psyche cannot help but look into it, even if he's terrified of what he might find. You've seen it before, the woman who walks away not with rage, but with grace. Not to punish, but to protect her peace. Her silence is not empty, it's sacred. And that silence, to a man trapped in performance, becomes unbearable. Why? Because it forces him to hear his own chaos. This is where his desire begins, not in lust, but in the confrontation with himself. He doesn't crave her body. He craves the way she made him feel something real, something ancient, something he lost touch with long ago. Some women think they must speak to be understood, must explain to be respected, must chase to be chosen. But those who awaken the deepest longing in a man often do the opposite. They are not reactionary, they are not loud, they are not seeking to be rescued. They are sovereign. A woman like this holds a presence that disturbs the masculine ego, not by attacking it, but by refusing to orbit around it. She is not cold, she is whole, and the man, if he's unready, will flinch. He'll mock her, call her too much, too quiet, or too distant. He'll claim she made him feel inadequate. But that is the point. She didn't make him anything. She simply stood without collapsing. And that's what made him see how small he still was. Desire, true desire. If you think his obsession lies in your beauty or charm, you've misunderstood the game. His deepest desire is awakened by the contrast between who he pretends to be and who he might become in your presence. But only if he dares to step into his own fire. That's why the woman who says nothing becomes unforgettable. Not because she withheld affection, but because she offered a vibration so rare, so clear, so unconcerned with validation, that it cracked his inner noise like thunder through glass. She didn't lecture him on how to love. She embodied love that no longer needed to be earned. And in doing so, she mirrored everything he was not, yet. And now, years later, in the quiet of night or in the middle of a crowded room, she returns, not as a memory, but as a question. Who was she, really? Why couldn't he reach her? And why does her silence still speak louder than the voices in his head? He thought he wanted pleasure. He thought he wanted warmth. But what he truly wanted, without even knowing, was transformation. And she was the door he was too afraid to walk through. She didn't beg to be understood. She didn't rush to fill the silence between them. She allowed it to grow, allowed it to echo. Because she knew, silence has weight. And some men must be crushed by it before they hear their own soul. To him, she was a woman. But to the deeper layers of his unconscious, she was a force. A feminine archetype not bound by roles or expectations, but by truth. Her very presence confronted the falsehoods he had built his identity around. She didn't try to dismantle him. She simply refused to shrink. That's the wound he still carries. Not that she left, but that she left him alone with himself. Jung wrote, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." She did that for him. Not through words, but through contrast. In her peace, he saw his noise. In her groundedness, he felt his disarray. In her depth, he realized how shallow he had been swimming. You might wonder, how can silence be seductive? How can stillness grip a man's mind for years? Because in a world of noise, chaos, and desperation, the woman who doesn't seek to prove herself becomes sacred. She is no longer a participant in the performance. She becomes the stage on which his illusions collapse. She didn't pull him close with flattery or flings. She didn't chase him with apologies or second chances. She stayed in her knowing. And that knowing became a weight on his chest. Some men run from this weight. Others chase it, obsessively. Not because they miss her, but because they miss what they almost became in her presence. He sees her in flashes, in the curve of a stranger's lip, the tone of a voice, the silhouette of someone passing by. But none of them are her. Because what he's looking for isn't physical, it's mythic. It's the rare feminine who could make him feel like a boy again, and a king in the same breath. He remembers how she listened without reacting. How she touched his arm and it felt like medicine. How she looked at him, not to measure him, but to reveal him. And he remembers the last time he saw her. Not the moment she walked away, but the moment she disappeared. It didn't look dramatic. There were no tears, no dramatic exits, just a quiet withdrawal of her energy, like a goddess receding into mist. That is what shattered him. Because men aren't haunted by rejection, they're haunted by reflection. She didn't make him feel unworthy. She revealed that he already did. And still, she never spoke of it. She never gave him a villain to blame. Just the mirror, and the space to confront it alone. That's the paradox. He's free now. No texts, no calls, no woman waiting in the wings. And yet, he is not free at all. Because when a woman disappears without rage, without need, without attachment, she becomes legend. She slips out of reach, not just physically, but psychically. She becomes the woman against whom all others are measured, and found wanting, not because they're not enough, but because they are not her. And here's the secret he may never admit aloud: he didn't fear her leaving. He feared that she saw him, and still left. And so she lives on, not in his inbox, not in his bed, but in the unexplored corridors of his psyche. The parts of him still aching to rise. Still wondering if he's worthy. Still haunted by the woman who said nothing, and changed everything. There is a sacred violence in a woman's silence, because it demands that the man face himself. Not the man he shows the world, not the man he performs as in his career, his charm, his rehearsed confidence, but the raw, unrefined self beneath it all. The boy who never felt chosen. The son who never felt seen. The lover who never learned how to stay open once the mirror turned back on him. When she said nothing, he didn't hear emptiness. He heard the floodgates open inside his own mind. A voice that whispered, "You've been pretending for too long." And that voice, her silence, echoed deeper than any insult ever could. Men don't crave what's easy. They crave what destabilizes them. Not in the way of chaos, but in the way of revelation. The woman who dares to hold herself with no demand, no apology, no theatrical display, she becomes unforgettable because she awakens what the world told him to bury. Most women try to soothe a man's ego. The rare one shatters it, gently, without words, by not participating in it. She becomes the one who triggers the quiet death of who he thought he was, and the beginning of who he's meant to be. That's why he remembers her. It wasn't her body, though it may have drawn him. It wasn't her voice, though it may have calmed him. It was the gap, the space between what she gave and what she withheld, that pulled his soul to the edge. You may think the man forgot you because he doesn't reach out. Because he moved on, smiled on Instagram, found another. But let me remind you, obsession doesn't always look like chasing. Sometimes, it looks like avoidance. Sometimes, the deepest imprints are the ones he cannot speak of, because they unravel everything he built himself around. Her silence did not scream. It invited. It said, "Come meet yourself in the places you've avoided." Some women try to be everything, available, pleasing, perfect. And in doing so, they become nothing more than a role in a script is seen before. But the woman who dares to become a mirror, the woman who dares to become real, leaves fingerprints on his soul that not even time can erase. Carl Jung understood the anima, the inner feminine that dwells inside every man. And when a woman embodies that energy not to manipulate but simply by being, she doesn't seduce his body. She seduces his inner world. She makes him feel, perhaps for the first time, the parts of himself he abandoned to be accepted. That is the woman he remembers. The one who didn't perform. The one who didn't stay just to be loved. The one who didn't need to win. She wasn't cold. She wasn't punishing. She was simply true. And that truth, in the shape of silence, became a shadow he couldn't outrun. So he tries to replace her. Not with women, but with noise. Success, sex, movement, anything to distract from the echo she left behind. But silence is loyal. It lingers. It waits. Every night, when the world quiets, when the lights dim, and the faces blur, her memory returns. Not as a plea, not as a ghost, but as a presence. The same presence that once looked at him and said nothing, because she had already seen everything. And if you are her, if you have been her, understand this: you don't need to be remembered to be powerful. You don't need to be missed to have mattered. And you don't need to return to prove you were real. Sometimes, the most unforgettable woman is the one who never said a word. There comes a moment, far removed from the chaos, when a man finally stops. Not because he wants to, but because life brings him to his knees. Maybe it's after the noise has drained him. Maybe it's in the middle of success that tastes strangely empty. Or maybe it's lying beside someone who doesn't see him, because the only woman who ever didn't stay. And it's then, precisely then, that he remembers. Not in a flash, not in a grand revelation, but in a stillness, a scent, a sound, a pause in the rhythm of his own breath. He recalls the woman who held herself like a prayer no one could recite. The woman who didn't chase, didn't explain, didn't try to be loved into value. The woman who left, not in anger, not in tears, but in bitch and truth. He learns too late, doesn't knock twice. She had become myth, not because she vanished, but because she lived in a way that made most people feel imaginary by comparison. not larger than life, but more real than the roles everyone else played. Her silence wasn't punishment, it was preservation. She withdrew not to wound him, but to remember herself. She became quiet not to confuse him, but to hear the voice he always drowned out, her own. You see, some men don't understand the cost of their projections until they meet a woman who refuses to carry them. He mistook her self-possession for coldness, her standards for games, her depth for danger. But that's only because he had never met a woman who refused to collapse just to make a man feel whole. She didn't threaten him, she revealed him. The image he tried to maintain cracked every time she looked at him without need, every time she stayed still when he expected performance. And that crack, that slow crumbling of his illusion, is what he truly feared. It wasn't that she was too much. It was that she was just enough to show him how little he knew about intimacy. Jung said that the things we repress do not disappear, they return, distorted, in the things we love and lose. And so, when he thinks of her, it's not only her he mourns, it's the version of himself he abandoned in her presence. Because she made him feel. And when she was gone, he felt everything. She showed him what it meant to be truly seen, and that kind of vision, once tasted, makes every other connection feel dim. You don't forget the woman who mirrors your shadow. You don't forget the woman who leaves, not because she stopped loving, but because she finally loved herself enough to stop waiting. And you certainly don't forget the woman who said nothing, because her absence says everything your ego was never ready to hear. There's a reason she haunts his memory and not his life. Because to touch her again, he'd have to become someone new. And most men aren't ready to be reborn. There's a brutal irony in the way men remember the woman who said nothing. She didn't slam the door. She didn't write a final text. She didn't beg him to understand her softness, her fire, or her needs. She simply stopped offering herself where she was not being seen. And the silence, her silence, became a language he never learned to speak. He looked for her in the chaos of distraction. In the skin of other women. In work, in wine, in the noise of achievement. But what he truly missed wasn't her body. It was the mirror she became, reflecting all that he had buried. Because when a man loses a woman who held space for his unconscious, he doesn't lose comfort. He loses the map to himself. You think it's dramatic to say she became a myth? Let me tell you, myths aren't made of fantasy. They're made of the truth people are too terrified to live. And that's what she embodied. A terrifying, divine truth. A woman so in tune with herself that no man could lie to her without feeling exposed. A woman who didn't need him, so his ego couldn't tether her. A woman who knew how to walk away with her head high, even if her heart bled. She was the proof that not all feminine power comes wrapped in nurturing words. Sometimes it comes in silence, in absence, in the echo of a goodbye that was never said, because it never needed to be. That's what haunts him, not what she did, but what she withheld. Her softness, her loyalty, her light, because he had access to it once, and now he never will again. And every time he sees her smile in his memory, it isn't joy that rises. It's regret, the kind that doesn't fade. He underestimated the force of the feminine void, the sacred power of the woman who stops giving and starts being. And he realizes, slowly, painfully, she was never his to keep. She was his to honor. And when he failed the test, the universe took her back. Jung knew this cycle well. The anima, the feminine soul image in a man, is both muse and mirror. If he loves her rightly, she unlocks his highest self. But if he loves her with ego, with control, with projection, she disappears. And in that disappearance, he is left alone with the very thing he tried to avoid, himself. You see, the woman who says nothing does not do so to punish. She does so to transform. She becomes the myth that visits him at night. The shadow that lingers behind every perfect partner. The voice beneath his breath when he's about to lie to himself again. Because he knows now, he was never forgotten. She didn't forget him. She evolved past him. And evolution always leaves the unevolved in awe. He wonders, now in the quiet moments, if she ever thinks of him. But that question is not born of love, it's born of longing for control. Because deep down, he knows, she is no longer reachable by the man he used to be. He remembers the way she used to see him, not just glance, but see. With eyes that pierced through every facade, every armor, every charming lie he wrapped himself in. He hated her for that clarity. And now, he worships it in her absence. Because she was not the kind of woman who begged. She was the kind who mirrored. And what he saw in her reflection was terrifying, the boy who never grew up. The man afraid of death. The predator disguised as protector. She saw it all, and stayed, for a time. But only for a time. You see, women like her are not built to rescue. They are built to reveal. To peel away the layers of who you pretend to be until you're left standing naked in your truth. And once the truth is on the table, you either rise, or run. He ran, not physically, not yet. Energy drink he shut her out. dismissed her needs, laughed at her depth, called her too much when he meant too real. And when she finally stopped trying, he thought he had won. He thought her silence was defeat. But her silence wasn't the end, it was rebirth. For her, and the beginning of a slow, spiritual death, for him. That's the thing about detachment. It's not loud, it doesn't scream or protest. It simply vanishes, and what's left behind is an emotional vacuum. A hole where her energy once lived. A space so full of absence that it becomes sacred. And every woman he meets after her feels less. Not because they're less, but because they don't echo. She was the echo of something ancient in him. A memory of wholeness, the feminine he exiled from himself long ago. And now that she's gone, he sees what she truly was, not a lover. Not a conquest, not a fantasy. She was the reminder, the mirror to his broken myth. The missing poem in his soul. The hand that reached for his humanity when even he had forgotten it existed. And in forgetting her, he forgot himself. But she didn't become cold. She became clear, not bitter, but boundaried. Not hard, but holy. You want to know what haunts him? It's not the fact that she left. It's the fact that she didn't need to say a word. Because everything she ever was, he now hears in the silence of his own soul. The woman who said nothing became everything. Now he watches her from afar, not with eyes, but with memory. Because the feminine doesn't haunt him in photographs or places. It lives in the corners of his unfinished conversations. In the songs she never sang, but he swears he hears. In the way no one else ever pauses before they speak, like she did, as if words were sacred. She became myth not because she vanished, but because he never understood her. And the mind cannot let go of what it never conquered. That is the secret. Men don't crave the women who stayed and explained. They crave the ones who walked away before they were ever fully named. She wasn't a storm. She was the quiet before it, the part that makes your skin crawl because you know something is coming. Something massive. She didn't throw plates. She threw silence, the kind that splits a man open without touching him. And when she finally went silent, she didn't do it to punish him. She did it to hear herself again. Because her voice had become too tied to his moods. Her joy dependent on his attention, her worth measured by how gently she could navigate his wounds. But she was not made to orbit his chaos. She was made to expand beyond it. It took her a while to remember that. To stop translating his indifference into a challenge. To stop offering softness where he only gave shadows. To stop explaining her soul to someone committed to misunderstanding it. But once she did, she didn't become cruel. She became empty, not hollow, holy. There's a kind of emptiness that scares a man more than rage ever could, the kind where he's no longer the center of your mind. He can feel it now. That haunting is not supernatural, it's psychological. He's haunted because the echo of her still lives in the rooms he locked. Because her energy wrote itself into the architecture of his psyche, and he can't renovate what he refuses to admit is cracked. And every woman who loves him now walks through her ghost. Not because she lingers, but because he never did the work to release her. She didn't scream when she left. She didn't cry. She simply stopped carrying what wasn't hers, his guilt, his trauma, his ego, his unfinished boyhood. And without the weight of all he projected onto her, she rose. Effortlessly. You see, she didn't disappear. She returned to herself. And now, in the stillness of his nights, she visits, not as a person, but as a presence. She lives in the split-second hesitation before he calls another woman beautiful. In the glance he casts across the room, wondering if someone else could ever hold his gaze the same way. In the spaces between his words, where her silence used to live. Because some women are not lovers, they are awakenings. They don't enter to fulfill, they enter to reveal. To shine light into the parts of him is buried under bravado, charm, performance. And when she left, she didn't just leave a void, she left a mirror. And that's what he keeps avoiding. Not her body, not her voice, not her laugh, but what she reflected back at him. The truth he wasn't ready to see. The boy he still was. The man he pretended to be. The places he thought were love but were really just control. The affection he gave that always came with a price. And the worst part? She never blamed him. She just outgrew him, quietly. While he was trying to figure out how to keep her on a leash made of mixed signals, she was untying the knots inside herself. He didn't notice, because men who are used to loud women never see the quiet ones leaving. They miss the goodbye that isn't spoken. They miss the moment she stops reaching out. But her exit wasn't for him. It was for the girl she used to be, the one who stayed too long, explained too much, tolerated too little in return. And when she let that version of herself go, she unlocked the version he'll chase for the rest of his life. He may never say it. Not to anyone, maybe not even to himself. But he knows. There was a moment when her presence cracked something open inside him, and nothing has quite fit back into place since. It's not about regret. It's about realization. The realization that the woman he lost wasn't too much. She was exactly the mirror he needed. But he looked away too soon. And now he can't stop looking back. The woman who knows her worth doesn't chase, she chooses.